Well, for decades, immigration was something you weren't really allowed to talk about other than to nod along and say everything was fine. I remember even the Conservative Party of Canada I think it was the 2021 election, the leader, when grilled by Rosemary Barton, said, oh, he just agrees with everything Justin Trudeau says. Can we please move on? It was terrifying. There was this political consensus that you couldn't challenge mass immigration, but I think that's falling apart. And last night, I think we heard one of the most bracing challenges to the immigration status quo ever by someone in a position of power. Without further ado, let me play for you an excerpt from Danielle Smith's address to the province last night, where she said there's going to be referendum questions on immigration. And don't go away, because after I play those, I'm going to bring on Michelle Rempel Garner, the Conservative Party of Canada's immigration critic, to get her reaction to the declarations. Actually, not really declarations, because it's putting it to the people, to the referendum questions of Alberta. Here, take a look.
The changes we need to make to immigration are a significant departure from the status quo, and therefore I am seeking a referendum mandate from Albertans to implement them. On October 19th, 2026, we will hold a provincial referendum primarily focused on how Albertans want our government to deal with the issue of immigration, as well as steps we can take as a province to strengthen our constitutional and fiscal position within a united Canada. These were far and away the issues most strongly identified by Albertans during last year's Alberta Next panel, town halls, and online submissions. And in my view, it is time to act on them. The fact is, Alberta taxpayers can no longer be asked to continue to subsidize the entire country through equalization and federal transfers, permit the federal government to flood our borders with new arrivals, and then give free access to our most generous in the country social programs to anyone who moves here. This is not only grossly unfair to Alberta taxpayers, but also financially crippling and undercuts the quality of our healthcare, education, and other social services. The October 19th referendum will therefore include the following questions. Number 1, do you support the government of Alberta taking increased control over immigration for the purpose of decreasing immigration to more sustainable levels, prioritizing economic migration, and ensuring Albertans have first priority to new employment opportunities? Number 2, do you support the government of Alberta introducing a law mandating only Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and individuals with an Alberta-approved immigration status will be eligible for provincially funded programs, such as health, education, and other social services? Number 3, assuming that all citizens and permanent residents continue to qualify for social support programs as they do now, do you support the government of Alberta introducing a law requiring all individuals with a non-permanent legal immigration status to be resident in Alberta for at least 12 months before qualifying for any provincially funded social support programs? Number 4, assuming that all citizens and permanent residents continue to qualify for public health care and education as they do now, do you support the government of Alberta charging a reasonable fee or premium to individuals with a non-permanent immigration status living in Alberta for their and their families' use of the healthcare and education systems? Number 5, do you support the government of Alberta introducing a law requiring individuals to provide proof of citizenship, such as a passport, birth certificate, or citizenship card, to be eligible to vote in a provincial election?
There you have it. Now, just to clarify, I sort of misspoke when I said that was her manifesto. No, those are the questions that are going to be put to Albertans in a vote. But if any poll over the last 10 years is accurate, I think each of those questions will be resoundingly approved by the people of Alberta. That's my prognostication. Joining us now via Skype is the official opposition critic for immigration, also known as the Shadow Cabinet Minister. Michelle Rempel Garner joins us now. Thank you so much for taking the time. You're so busy. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, as always.
Very interesting comments by Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta. And to put it to the people is quite a dramatic move, because I think that lets the people be the bad guy for challenging the consensus, not Danielle Smith herself.
Well, look, I'll just speak from the federal perspective. It's been incredibly frustrating to watch the Liberals completely ruin Canada's immigration system for everybody, for Canadians, for people who want to come to Canada to build a better life and play by the rules. And they've brought too many people in too fast for housing, healthcare, and jobs to keep up. That's just the reality. And it's not just Premier Smith that is expressing concerns about that fact. It's premiers of all different political stripes across the country. And I think what you're seeing now, and not just in Alberta, is provincial governments challenging the lack of federal leadership in fixing the situation that they created, right? We have an extremely weak immigration minister right now. And that's why the federal Conservatives, we've been putting forward, I know I've been on your show before, a lot of really bold and common sense proposals to restore order to Canada's immigration system. Because we haven't seen any action or even acknowledgement from the Liberal government that they led Canada to this place. And now, of course, you see provincial governments, advocacy groups, and of course, the official opposition saying, look, there needs to be action. And now it's kind of like, over to you, Mark Carney.
Constitutionally, immigration is a federal matter. Obviously, it has to do with our borders. So for a province to wade into it is interesting, but she's not saying that she can stop immigration. What she can say is the things that are within the provincial jurisdiction, health and education and provincial voting, she can take a stand on. Do you support her proposed use of those provincial powers to alter how mass immigration affects Alberta?
Well, again, I'd point to other provinces as well, too, or actually municipalities. Olivia Chow, hardly a Conservative, proposed having to raise property taxes in response to the number of bogus asylum claimants that were flooding into the Greater Toronto area over the last several years under the federal Liberal government's, abysmal immigration policies. Then you had, we famously had the immigration minister in front of committee this year, and she said, well, I don't consider healthcare when setting immigration levels. She said something to that effect. She sort of implied it. And of course, healthcare is a provincial responsibility. So when you have a federal government taking policy that's within their jurisdiction, but that massively impacts provincial jurisdiction, like healthcare, for example, or to a certain extent housing, you are going to see people push back. And so again, I would just say how I've tried to address this issue in my role as shadow minister is come up with concrete solutions to see the federal government reverse some of these policies that have led to this sort of tension. Like, we talked about birthright citizenship. We've talked about major reforms to the asylum system so that people who are abusing the asylum system can't get better healthcare benefits than Canadians do, for example. I could literally spend 2 hours talking to you about the proposals that we've put forward. But I think that you are going to see not just I know that Premier Smith is going to get a lot of attention because she's a Conservative premier talking about immigration, but frankly, it's been Liberal premiers as well, too. And it's incumbent upon the Liberal government and Mark Carney to take some of the suggestions that Conservatives have put forward at the federal level to reform the system, but also, Ezra, massively bring down immigration levels, come up with a plan to remove the nearly 3 million people who have expired or expiring visas this year. Temporary needs to mean temporary. And yeah, it's a giant mess. But we will continue as, a federal Conservative party to push for reforms to bring back order and fairness.
I saw an interesting debate online the other day between Candace Malcolm, the boss of Juno News, and Jason Kenney, the former Premier of Alberta and former federal immigration minister. And I think he was fairly well regarded as an immigration minister. He cracked down on some fraud, even though I would say the gross numbers were large. And they were quarreling over a debate that Candace Malcolm had with someone from the Dominion Society, which is, I don't know if it's all right. It's sort of 1 degree of separation from some racist guys in Diagolon. So I think that Jason Kenney was chiding her for that. But she said, look, the idea of sending home millions of people whose right to be here has expired, that's not racist at all. There's nothing racial about your visa running out and you having to go home. And there was a real argy-bargy between the two of them. And we don't want to be racial. We don't, you could be an outstanding, loyal, patriotic Canadian of any color, of any religion. I truly believe that. But the idea of sending home 3 million people whose visas have expired will naturally touch people from foreign countries. Jason Kenney felt uncomfortable with that. Do you have the stamina and the tenacity to call for the deportation of 3 million souls, many of whom will be visible minorities, even if you're called racist like we saw in that online debate.
Yeah, so I don't know, and I didn't follow any of the discourse that you talked about, but I'll just talk to the federal Conservatives' position on the issue of 2.9 million visas, either expired or expiring, on top of at least 500,000 undocumented persons in Canada. So the principles that we've been putting forward is this: if you are in Canada on a temporary visa, temporary means temporary under our law, and at the end of your visa, you need to leave. And the reality is the federal Liberal government brought in way too many people without a plan to ensure that they leave at the end of their visas, to the point where they've even said they don't even know if they can track them. So of course, Conservatives, as we always do, are going to call for the law to be upheld. The Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, Ezra, states that when somebody's visa expires, they need to do what? They need to leave. That's the law. And Conservatives, I've been calling for this since I was reappointed as Shadow Minister for Immigration. And, it was one of the first questions I actually asked Lena Diab in the House of Commons last May was, do you have a plan to remove these people? And the answer was, well, I don't know. And so, of course, we're going to continue to push for that. And frankly, I think that if the Liberals don't deal with that, we're going to have a massive level of problems. Everything from, we see AI disrupting the workforce. I wrote about that this week. Why are they issuing hundreds of thousands of more temporary permits when they don't have a plan to have millions of people with expired visas to leave? The other thing I'd say is this, Ezra. You've seen people from across the country who are on expired visas, going to different rallies and whatnot, asking to stay. And I think the Liberals lied to them too. The Liberals said, well, they kind of wink and a nod. It was like, oh yeah, you can stay here, right?
Yeah.
And it just goes to show what a crisis of humanity this is. But the Conservative Party's position that we are continuing to maintain is the law says that if you are here on a temporary visa, you need to leave. And now it is incumbent upon the Liberal government to come up with a plan to get people to do so. It's just common sense. It's what the law says, and it's what Canadians expect. So that's what we're focused on.
I think you're right. I think some of these folks who came over were lied to by immigration consultants. Frankly, were lied to by some of these diploma mills who said, come here as a student, stay forever. And there's all sorts of tricksters showing them tricks to get around the system. Here's what I keep trying to wrap my head around. In the United States under Joe Biden, the number I keep hearing that came in was 13 million. Now, they came in illegally, unlike the legal entry of students and temporary workers here. 13 million. That country's 10 times bigger than ours. So that would be like 1.3 million. We're dealing with a number twice as big as the Americans. And it's tough for them. I mean, look at ICE going to try and find individual people. It's causing friction in the streets. Do you think Canadians have the stomach for that? Or do you think it's the way Danielle Smith is suggesting? Don't use muscle, just turn off the flow of the free stuff, and many of them will go home on their own. Like ICE is a heavy-handed way, you could say, compared to just no more free stuff, which Alberta is saying. What do you think?
Well, I guess I'd just look at our own context, but maybe start, if you'll indulge me, with the United Kingdom. A stat that really woke me up last year was there's a lot of debate in the United Kingdom right now on immigration. It's, I think, the top voter issue. I know that you covered that politics a lot, but there's actually more per capita and absolute asylum claim numbers or asylum claims made in Canada over a same period that there were in the United Kingdom. And look at how big the debate is there, right? Here's the reality. Like, I think the Canadians, we had a consensus on immigration that it was durable across different levels or across different political stripes for many years, up until the Liberals took power about 10 years ago. And then what happened was the Liberals brought in too many people too fast for housing, healthcare, and jobs to keep up. So, for me, I think that the average Canadian, average permanent resident look around and go, well, wait, We have a youth jobs crisis. Why are we still bringing in massive levels of temporary foreign workers or foreign students on work permits? Why are we allowing bogus asylum claimants to stay in Canada for years? Why are we allowing non-citizens who've been convicted of serious crimes in Canada to avoid deportation because they're getting more lenient sentences by judges by virtue of their immigration status? These are all questions that Canadians have that I've tried to respond to with private members' bills, amendments to bills, but we've seen the Liberals just completely ignore this. And I will say this, public opinion polling has shown that immigration is the number one issue that the Liberals are weak on. And it's because they've refused to listen to common sense Canadians across the political stripe that are like, yeah, we will be open and welcoming to immigrants, but not in these numbers and not under these conditions. Yeah. And so restoring order through common sense proposals, I think, is something that everybody's expecting us to do, and everybody's expecting Mark Carney to do. So, I don't think that anybody who's saying, we don't have the housing, healthcare, and jobs to keep up with the numbers that the Liberals are allowing are unreasonable. In fact, they're right. And restoring that principle is something that, of course, Conservatives stand behind at the federal level.
I got two really quick snappers, and then I'll let you go. I really appreciate you spending so much time with me. Here's the first one, which came out of left field to me, is the Liberal government proposing that we bring in foreign nationals to be our soldiers. And I just thought the word mercenary jumped into my head. I mean, they say there would be background checks and security checks. What do you think of the idea of bringing in foreigners because we're not able to recruit soldiers from Canada?
Well, I think that serving in Canada's armed forces is a wonderful opportunity for any Canadian. But I think that where the Liberal government should first be asking is why more Canadians, we have a youth jobs crisis in Canada, aren't choosing the armed service or being processed into the armed service or armed forces as an option. That's where I would start. I don't think that they have good answers on that. I just as a sort of stay tuned spoiler alert on this, I do have questions for the government on this. But I mean, our Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, has been very blunt about the fact that Canada needs to restore a warrior culture within the armed forces as opposed to the woke culture that we've seen. I think that's part of it. But let's start with Canadians who want to serve. And then I have questions on the other part. So stay tuned on that. Maybe an appearance for another show.
Last question, and thanks again. I agree with you that immigration is the number one issue. And by the way, I think it impacts many other issues from housing to crime. And by the way, crime within immigrant communities, as we see out there in Surrey, for example. Now, the Liberals are smart. And if they believe in anything, they believe in winning. And Mark Carney, who was the, zero emissions guy for the longest year, he shocked everyone, including the Conservatives, by scrapping the carbon tax. The one thing you wouldn't have expected, he did to win. And I think that was a major reason that he won. Not all, but as part of it. Do you think the Liberals, if they're staring at the kind of public opinion that you've referenced, that I agree in, do you think they would ever adopt your ideas? Or do you think they're just too beholden to, machine politics based on ethnic vote banks? And this is how they talk, by the way. Do you think this is something they could flip? Because it's such a powerful issue. Maybe they'll pull a carbon tax move on you. What do you think?
Well, I will say this, they're going to have an opportunity to answer your question in just a few short weeks. So I have a private member's bill in front of the House of Commons. It's a very simple one-line amendment to the criminal code that would prohibit judges from using somebody's immigration status to give them a more lenient sentence if they've been convicted of a serious crime to avoid deportation, which is a very standard practice right now. So there is a bill in front of the House of Commons. It's my bill. There will be a vote on that in just like a couple of weeks, basically. So they're going to have an opportunity to answer your question with their feet, whether or not they're going to vote for that or not. When we debated this bill in the House a couple of weeks ago, or sorry, last month, one of the senior Liberals, they got up and said, well, it's not like, any judge is giving special consideration to rapists. And then I got up in the House of Commons the next day and talked about how a judge gave special consideration to somebody, a non-citizen who had raped and impregnated a 13-year-old girl twice. So these cases are happening. And, I would just say, in answer to your question, let's look and see what the Liberals do in response to my common sense bill, which I think Canadians of any political stripe agree with. Are they going to listen to, very far left special interest groups or lawyers who profit off of this system? Or are they going to uphold the rule of law and the spirit of Canada's immigration law? So stay tuned to that. I would love to be on your show again after that vote happens. And I would encourage Liberals who are watching this to be like, look, if you actually care about this country, or even as Ezra said, if you care about winning, this is a no-brainer bill that I hope that they'll support.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing that result. Thanks again for spending so much time with us. Very interesting. I agree with you. This is the number one issue, even if it's not always on the front page, and even if it's sort of hidden or downplayed by the regime media. I think this is the number one subject of the under news, as Mickey Kaus would say, the news that people talk about, even if they're not allowed to. Michelle Garner, Rempel Garner, thanks so much for spending time with us.
Thank you for having me.